To understand how people think about death, we need to look at how these beliefs have changed over time. In the past, death was a regular part of life. Due to poor living conditions and a lack of medical knowledge, many people died at a young age. As science improved, helping people live longer, our attitudes toward death also evolved. In modern Western societies, death is often something we ignore or fear. Our lifestyles and medical advancements have made death feel less personal, and many people no longer see it as a natural part of life. As a result, when death happens, many of us feel unprepared to face it. In early human societies, medical knowledge was very basic, and people often died from diseases, accidents, or predators. In these times, death was familiar to everyone. People saw death as a painful and quick process. Some early cultures feared death because they believed it was not natural, but instead an accidental or abnormal event. For others, however, death was not something to be afraid of. They saw it as a transition from one form of existence to another. In these cultures, the soul was thought to pass into a different realm, and the community would help prepare the dying person for this journey through rituals and ceremonies. In societies without writing, or pre-literate societies, death was closely linked to how people treated those who had passed away. Some cultures would honor their dead through memorials, rituals, and stories, keeping their memories alive. In other cultures, the dead were feared because it was believed that they could harm the living. These cultures often chose not to speak of the deceased, believing that ignoring them would prevent any negative influence. Funeral rites in these societies were designed either to show respect for the dead or to protect the living from potential harm. In ancient Greece, people believed that the souls of the dead lived on and gained knowledge in the afterlife. Plato, a famous Greek philosopher, wrote about the idea that true wisdom could only be achieved after death, as the soul would be free from the distractions of the body. In line with these beliefs, many ancient cultures prepared the dead for an afterlife by surrounding their bodies with items they had used during life. Archaeological digs of Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and Native American burial sites have revealed that these items were thought to be useful in the next world. Philippe Ariès, a historian, noted that Western views on death went through three main stages after ancient times. The first period spanned from the 6th to the early 12th century, the second from the late 12th century to the 17th century, and the third from the 17th century through to the 20th century. During these times, people's attitudes toward death changed dramatically. From the 6th to the early 12th century, death was seen as something everyone would eventually face. Death was a common occurrence due to limited medical knowledge and the inability to treat many diseases and injuries. People viewed death as either an escape from life's hardships or a sad departure from its joys. The Church played a central role during this period, providing guidance on what to expect after death. Heaven was promised to those who lived good lives, while hell awaited those who sinned. Between the 12th and 17th centuries, people started to focus more on their own deaths rather than the deaths of others. The act of dying became a personal experience, and beliefs in a personal afterlife grew stronger. The Church's influence began to wane as scientific thoughts started to rise, especially among the wealthy and educated. Social changes during the Renaissance reflected this shift, with people moving away from religious explanations and toward a scientific understanding of life and death. In the 17th to 19th centuries, death was once again seen as a shared experience. It was romanticized in art and literature, with death often depicted as a companion or a peaceful transition. Ideas of an afterlife focused on the soul's immortality and the hope of reuniting with loved ones after death. By the end of this period, death had become a familiar and less frightening concept. For instance, Mozart, a famous composer, viewed death as a welcomed friend, believing that it unlocked the door to true happiness. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the fear of death began to rise once again. Advances in science and technology played a big part in this shift. For many, the certainty provided by religious teachings started to fade, leaving people unsure of what to believe about death. Medical science, while helping people live longer and die more comfortably, also distanced people from death. As hospitals and nursing homes became the places where people died, death was no longer a common event in the home. The dying were often removed from their families, cared for by health professionals, which made the experience feel less personal and more detached. Scientific advances also prolonged life in ways that sometimes came at the cost of the quality of that life. People began to fear death not just because it meant the end of life, but because they felt a loss of control over the dying process. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a leading voice in the study of death, argued that this fear could be lessened by improving the way doctors and nurses communicated with dying patients. She believed that combining the best of modern medicine with a focus on human relationships could ease the fear many people feel about death. In recent decades, especially since the 1960s, there has been a growing interest in death and dying. This is partly because of the media's constant coverage of death, the rise in life expectancy, and a broader social movement focused on self-awareness. With people living longer, there has been an increased focus on the elderly and the dying. Movements like those against the Vietnam War and for civil rights in the 1960s gave way to advocacy for the rights of the elderly and dying as time went on. The establishment of hospices and advancements in palliative care also reflected this shift. At the same time, the media has played a huge role in shaping modern attitudes toward death. The constant news coverage of wars, natural disasters, and other tragedies has made death feel ever present in our lives. However, the way death is presented in the media often feels detached, making it easy to believe that death happens to others, not to us. It's only in private moments that many people truly confront their own mortality and the fear that comes with it. Modern Westerners often fear the end of their lives because of the unknown nature of what happens after death. While science has advanced our understanding of the dying process and has even helped reduce the pain associated with it, it hasn't answered the question of what happens after death. For many, this uncertainty fuels their fear of death. There is no scientific proof that an afterlife exists, but there is also no evidence to disprove it. This lack of certainty leaves many people struggling with the unknown. In recent years, as science and technology have failed to provide answers to questions about the afterlife, many people have turned to religion and spirituality for comfort. In the United States, religious practices have increased after a period of decline in the mid-20th century. As the baby boomer generation has aged, and as their parents have grown older, many have returned to religious practices. Movements like the Jesus Movement and other fundamentalist groups in the 1970s also sparked a renewed interest in spirituality. In addition to traditional religious beliefs, there has been a growing interest in paranormal experiences, particularly near-death experiences. Books and research on the subject have flourished since the publication of Raymond Moody's Life After Life in 1975. Studies suggest that over 5% of the US population has had a near-death experience, and more people are beginning to share their stories. As these experiences gain more attention, some individuals find comfort in believing that these glimpses of the afterlife can help them overcome their fears of death and improve their lives. As we've seen, beliefs and practices concerning death have shifted throughout history. In earlier times, death was a familiar part of life, something that people saw often and accepted as inevitable. In modern Western societies, however, death has become something to be feared or ignored, often hidden away in hospitals and nursing homes. Advances in science and medicine have helped people live longer and die more comfortably, but they have also removed the personal and familiar aspects of death. Today, many people are searching for meaning in the face of death. While science has provided incredible advancements, it hasn't answered the ultimate question of what happens after we die. As a result, many are turning inward, seeking spiritual or religious comfort to fill the gap left by modern medicine. Whether through traditional religious practices or through belief in near-death experiences, people continue to search for ways to make sense of death and find peace in its inevitability. Hey there, YouTube fans! Do you want access to amazing content? Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Stay updated with all our latest videos. Join our community of awesome subscribers. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.